The last week of September 2014 was a significant week for the country. It was said that Jim Traficant died on the 27th of September, which was Saturday. There's been a lot of articles published about his death, yet none really give any information. Just the same old line. Died of a tractor accident. It rolled over on him, pinned him in such a way that he could not breathe. They transported him to the hospital, where they transported him to another hospital where they induced a coma and ran some tests, they said. There have been a few people raising questions about the lack of information on the death of this notoriously former Congressman, Jim Traficant. At the time, I was going to make a video on it. And of course, I was researching the news of the area, scouring the internet, trying to find more information on his death, when I ran across a little news blurb on an incident that happened the same day or around the same time that just the incident itself was highly unusual. And it was the death of two FBI employees on the Ohio River. And they say that these two off-duty employees with the Cincinnati office of the FBI, they say they were not special agents, they were employees of the FBI, whatever that means. They were identified as Bryce Eastlick, 28, and John Stack II, 29. And supposedly, late Thursday night, about 11 o'clock, they were killed in a 19-foot pleasure boat that slammed into a massive barge traveling down the Ohio River between Cincinnati and Newport. I said to myself, well, Jim Traficant had a notorious relationship with the FBI. Let's just say there was no love lost between them. And these two gentlemen died in a very unusual incident on the Ohio River. And they're saying that the men were found dead on the boat when fire crews arrived. They had their lights on. The barge had its lights on. Quote, "It appears the boat crossed right in front of the barge just after 11 p.m., Cincinnati District Fire Chief Lou Arnold said. The barge captain was at the wheel and saw the entire incident," Fire Chief Arnold said. Quote, "He was looking right out the front, watching what was going on. It was a big barge," Arnold said in an interview. "The pleasure boat just crossed right in front of them and slammed into the barge. We can only assume they didn't see it. They can only assume they didn't see it." Well, as a precaution, they say that the first responders searched through the night to make sure that no one from the pleasure boat fell into the water and that there were no other victims. Well, then finally, on November 5th of 2014, some details were reported about the two FBI employees. The coroner identified them and stated that alcohol was in their system. Also, that the two died from blunt force trauma. The Campbell County Coroner's Provisional Toxicology Report states that Bryce Eastlick and John Stack had alcohol in their systems the night their boat hit that 600-foot barge. This article states that the crash happened on September 25th, and Cincinnati fire officials said it's believed the men may have been at a Riverbend concert before the crash. Okay. Well, that is hearsay. And also, have you ever been to a concert that ended before 11 o'clock at night? And I find it highly unusual and quite unlikely that two young men in their late 20s who are employed by the FBI would go to a concert, just two guys going to a concert, and then they decide that they are going to ride the lightning on the Ohio River. Just two men. Where were the women? Where were their wives or girlfriends? When their boat hit the side of the barge, the boat went underneath the barge, rolled, and resurfaced. And that these two young men who worked for the FBI died from blunt force trauma. Apparently their bodies were still in the boat when the fire department reached them. Now, some interesting tidbits that have come out regarding the circumstances and death of former Congressman Traficant. People who directly witnessed the accident are being suspiciously tight-lipped about what occurred to Jim Traficant. Andrew Thompson, the only eyewitness to the accident and the one to call 911, is not giving any interviews and even wanted his identity concealed. All interested parties have is Thompson's 911 call saying Jim was pinned under the overturned tractor and didn't appear to be breathing. And perhaps the most important news has come from the Mahoning County Coroner's Office out there in Ohio, which reported that the cause of Jim's death was positional asphyxia, meaning Jim was pinned in such a way that he could not breathe. According to the forensic pathologist, Dr. Joseph S. Orr Jr., who completed the autopsy on September 29th, said Jim never suffered a heart attack prior to the accident, as was widely rumored, nor was there any trace of drugs or alcohol in his system. More significant was Orr's finding that Jim had no crushing injuries to his body, as was reported from sources at the hospital. The official story is that Jim's tractor ran over a blade or scraper, and the front end was elevated to the point that it flipped backward, and Jim remained fixed on his seat as the tractor swung 180 degrees over him. Being that the seat was lower than the top of the wheels and the top of the engine cover, Jim was compressed enough to restrict his breathing, but somehow was not crushed by the 1.5-ton tractor crashing on him. Although Jim's breathing appeared to have stopped due to the accident, after CPR was administered, he began breathing on his own, and his heart was also beating on its own. The life support machines were only there as a backup. He never regained consciousness, however. His wife believed that Jim was already brain dead when the EMS got to him. His wife stated, "The brain can only go 6 minutes without oxygen," she said, "and Jim went for 7 to 10 minutes before he got CPR. Therefore, he is brain dead." Well, Jim was breathing on his own even after he was taken off a backup respirator on September 26th. And his heart was beating on its own. He was even snoring, according to family spokesperson Heidi Hani. Also goes on to say that the family spokesperson Heidi said that even though he was snoring and was breathing and his heart was beating on its own, there was no hope of recovery. So he was transported from St. Elizabeth Health Center in Youngstown to the Hospice of the Valley on Friday, September 26, to make him as comfortable as possible. And supposedly he died at 11:30 in the morning on Saturday, September 27th. His remains were cremated. Circumstances at the hospital, the hospice, and the burial are somewhat vague, especially in light of the coroner's report. But even stranger is how the tractor flipped over. It is difficult to visualize how Jim, who was well acquainted with the tractor, the terrain, and the barn, presumably traveling at low speed on flat ground, could have capsized like this. Both the barn and the tractor had lights on, yet Jim must have not seen a fairly large object. Sounds like the reporting about the two off-duty FBI employees. Okay, this being said, the accident happened on September 25th, 2014, which is the Thursday that those two FBI employees died on the Ohio River. Very odd and tragic deaths happening on the same day. The death of Jim Traficant was tragic and highly unusual. So was the death of these two FBI employees. Tragic and highly unusual. That is the point that I am making. I have no idea if they are related or connected, and I'm not trying to say that they are, merely pointing out that they happened.